This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, flexing the federal government muscles to drive innovation.
The government has tremendous power as the monopsony in this marketplace. It is both defines the market and it regulates the market.
Jerry McGinn of George Mason University on FedGov Today in just a moment. Uniting program strategy, advanced technology, process, and execution for a more efficient government. That's Maximus. Every program, every service, every time. That's innovation forward. Learn more at maximus.com/federal. Spending on other transaction authority contracts is up in the Defense Department 220% since 2018, according to research from the Baroni Center of Government Contracting at George Mason University. Agencies across government say they'll use the OTA model to drive innovation in their agencies. Jerry McGinn's executive director of the Baroni Center. He's former acting deputy assistant secretary of defense for manufacturing and industrial base. Jerry, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. What's your sense of the trend line for innovation to come into the federal government and to kind of take root across the federal government to change the way that people think about how they do new things and integrate new things into the business of government every day? Welcome, Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. Great to be back with you, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so the question you ask is a critical one, because we've been focusing, the federal government has been focusing on innovation for the better part of a decade plus. And they've made some, with this analysis we did, this government contracting trends and financial performance index shows some really positive aspects to it. I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening, but we don't really have good measures to determine like how much progress we're making. And then there are also some of the emphasis, on small business spending. We're spending a lot of money on small business, but not a lot of it's on really innovation, so to speak. So it's like there is good progress, but we still have some of the same challenges in terms of delivering systems in time and services as well. So I think we have to develop better kind of metrics in terms of how we evaluate innovation.
How much of that is because determining what innovation is may be subjective rather than objective? Or is it becoming more objective in determining what's innovation and what's not?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair question. I think it's sort of innovation's in the eye of the beholder, and somewhat now because innovation is the focus, everything is innovation. It can become over-determined. And so there's that challenge. But there are proxies, things such as, the use of other transactions authorities to get things on contract faster, commercial solutions openings, the small business innovation research efforts. Those are kind of often used as proxies for innovation. And the challenge is like, those kind of efforts have dramatically exploded. OTs are up 220% in the last 5 years. SBIRs have tripled almost in the last 10 years across the federal government. But measuring the outcomes of those is very opaque, and it's all the evidence we have is all anecdotal, and so it makes it hard to see. Okay, if this is innovation, okay, what does it lead to, right? So that's kind of where we are at now is trying to develop kind of how do we better measure what innovation is.
You and your colleagues write in this Government Contracting Trends and Performance Index, just came out. We have a link to that on the show page today at fedgovtoday.com. Right, incentives are the true drivers of innovation. What are the incentives that do drive innovation, and not just in the Defense Department, but that's where I hear most people talking about driving innovation, but all across the federal government? What are the incentives that drive innovation, and are there things that people think are incentives to drive innovation that turn out to not actually do it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And what we did is we actually, there's a lot of information about the publicly traded companies, in terms of, they report every quarter, they have an annual 10K and all this. But the challenge is that the vast majority of the industrial base is privately held, small businesses, privately held companies, private equity. So we surveyed over 400 firms of all kinds of different sizes. And we found out, we asked them, what are your key performance indicators? And that really told us kind of what the incentives are. And they really are revolve around two big kind of areas. One is sort of on the doing business with the government, the ease of that, and then around business development metrics. So, the firms that resoundingly identify profit, ease of doing business, and steady partnership as their KPIs. And then, they measure their success by, the companies do by their win rates, by their proposals submitted, their pipeline, these kind of things.
The ease of doing business with the government, that's one that has been red flags going up around that for decades now, I suppose. Yeah. What is driving improvement there that you see, Jerry, and what can be done to drive that improvement faster? Because everybody on both sides, the industry side and the government side, everybody says we want more of that in DOD. We want more non-traditional companies involved in the DIB, and on and on and on. And yet we're still having those conversations. So apparently we're not where the organizations on either side of that equation would like to be.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. And I think, part of it is, again, sort of getting back to you sort of get what you measure, right? And if you, right now, in the Department of Defense, they have this term non-traditionals, which are supposedly kind of what you want to bring more of. But the way that it's currently defined in legislation, it only covers, non-traditionals cover 93% of the industrial base. So, so it's really sort of not a really useful definition to work with. So one of the things, and this is actually in the Forged Act, which the Senate has put forward, of redefining that to be something that's what you really want to measure. And I think there's a structural challenge in that the government contracting system was, after, it's in the 2000s and beyond, has become very kind of trying to get maximum efficiencies and effectiveness from every dollar. And there's goodness to that because you want that, but the challenge is that creates more kind of scrutiny, more kind of effort on like qualifying parts and so on. And that just slows down more reviews, and that slows down the system. And one of the things, a real opportunity that's before us is the Trump administration has taken on this head on in a number of fronts, with several executive orders, one around the revolutionary FAR overhaul, which you're very familiar with, which is about cutting, the regulations so you can really focus on doing business and not on kind of T's and C's, right? Likewise, the reform efforts in the Department of Defense and with foreign military sales, and so they're getting after us, and the time for that is right because we've made progress, but we still have. We're still kind of haven't changed that mindset, and we still have the problems of, if we go to war with Taiwan, for instance, we're still going to be out of missiles in 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. And even though we've been struggling with this, for several years, so there's a real capacity challenge and how we do business challenge.
What are the things that you will watch, that you and your colleagues at the Baroni Center will watch, not just in the next couple of months, but when you go back and do this work again in a year or so and release the next index, what are the things that you're going to track between now and then, Jerry?
The fundamental thing that I think needs to change, and we need to watch over the next year plus, is how the government changes how it buys. And you see that in some of the innovation efforts with other transactions, commercial solutions openings, and SBIRs and the like. But the government has tremendous power as the monopsony in this marketplace. It is both defines the market and it regulates the market. And guess what? The companies that are in that marketplace, they respond to that market. That's what puts them in this market. And so if you change some of the incentive structures, for instance, if you get rid of the cost accounting standards and over time, it enables companies, it reduces overhead costs, and you could even change margin structures to, give companies more opportunity with better performance for better returns. You can also change how the government solicits. Speed is important, but it's really more about kind of the ability to produce things over time, have multi-source activities, so that you have kind of a broader industrial base with new companies, revitalized traditional companies, and the like. So looking for how those kind of activities take hold over time is what I'll be looking for.
Jerry, it's always great to talk to you. Congratulations on the release of this, and thanks for joining me today, as always.
Thanks very much, Francis. Great to see you.
You can find a link to the index Jerry told you about on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. The next FedGov Today podcast comes tomorrow. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence is getting a makeover. John Sherman, a former ODNI and former DOD CIO, has some thoughts. You can listen to that show and every FedGov Today podcast anytime you want on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. Talk to you then. Thanks for listening.